I'm not going to share contracts. I'm not going to share documents. I'm going to upload them to some sort of GPT or LLM and then share the LLM, and you can query that. An agent might visit another website and be received by an agent, and the agents will have a conversation without the humans. It's a new era in organizational design.
Hello everyone, I am Sergio Maldonado and this is Masters of Privacy, a set of interviews covering the intersection of marketing, data, privacy and technology with a clear goal in mind, which is redefining the relationship between people, brands and media around transparency and control. Which is to say, we're aiming for real customer centricity, or if you will, human centricity. We regularly talk to DPOs, CMOs, CDOs, and whoever else we find interesting and able to share valuable insights. So we hope you like it. Please do reach out if you have any ideas on future topics or speakers. Okay, we have Gam Dias here today for the second time, although our first interview happened more than 4 years ago. Gam Dias is a seasoned technologist and entrepreneur with a rich background in data strategy, software engineering, product management, AI, and innovation. Over the years, he's helped build and scale cutting-edge technologies at both startups and global companies with a focus on how automation and intelligent systems can unlock human potential. His latest book, Agents Unleashed, feels to me, as I've told him, like a very practical manual to get started building agents straight away. For starters, in the Salesforce ecosystem, so Agent Force, although there is a new volume coming up that will expand the practice beyond Salesforce. I also need to share that Gam and I will soon record a limited series of episodes for a separate channel called After the Magic, in which we will aim to dissect very specific technologies in MarTech, marketing technology, as if we were doing a kind of real-time Gartner Magic Quadrant, but without any sugarcoating or pitching from anyone. Although I will make sure to include a data protection compliance dimension in it. The intended audience for After the Magic is CIOs, CTOs, maybe technical CMOs, rather than privacy or AI professionals. With that said, let's now talk about Agents Unleashed with Gam Dias. Gam, thanks for joining me again.
Hey, good to see you, Sergio.
Look, you've done a lot, and your latest experience was at Hubble, and I understand that Hubble Process Analytics had a lot to do with the path to writing this book and getting into agents. So, what's the connection between Hubble and agents?
So, as you know, I come from the whole Oracle ecosystem. So the Salesforce is very, very new to me. And as I got deeper and deeper into it, I found it more and more interesting. I mean, Hyperforce and the whole built on Oracle thing, and the way they've kind of built this massive configuration engine. Fantastic idea. And so we were building process analytics. It is a non-platform application to actually understand the business processes that are running through Salesforce. It's essentially a process mining application. And so, when I kind of handed over the reins to that product to, we started off as Uncommon Purpose. We moved to Hubble Technologies. It's now Hubble Technologies. I handed off the reins of that product to the Hubble Technologies team, and they're selling and marketing it alongside Hubble Diagnostics. And so one of the things we discovered was if you are automating processes using Agentforce, the first thing you need to understand is the process you're automating. and Hubble does exactly that. You also need to understand whether the org that you're implementing on is up to running Agentforce. So you need to kind of relieve it of tech debt. And so the two products together really serve Agentforce very well. And so as I was coming off of that, I wanted very much to document my knowledge and understanding of how you apply both products if you're thinking about building agents and Agentforce in particular. So it really started off as a guide, a deep guide to understanding your org and the processes around it before you apply agents. So that was the genesis, really, and that's the link.
Good. Well, thank you. And so then you got to the book, and why? So why what's exciting? What was exciting about the Salesforce ecosystem?
So um, Salesforce has built a religion or a movement. It's quite amazing. I only went to Dreamforce a couple of times, and just to see the energy there around it. And so Salesforce has done some amazing things in the last 20 years. And when I didn't actually attend the 2024 Dreamforce, but I saw Mark Benioff talking about agents and the energy that came from that. It was quite a show. It wasn't Dreamforce, it was Agentforce. It was, and as I saw the energy, the positivity, and the the objective of a billion agents, it's textbook how they launched this product. It was pretty amazing. Now, as I was watching it, I've been in the game long enough. Got I'm kind of old in this game of enterprise software, and what I what I could see was, all this hype. It's going to be fantastic. Everyone's going to be really pumped. They're going to come out of the show and going to go, "I want agents," and everybody's going to kind of bowl along. And the first couple of quarters, everybody's going to be building agents, and the SI partners are going to be pushing it. And my gut feel said, "Hang on a sec. This is never so simple." You know, and it's the old Gartner hype cycle. We go up, we have maximum hype, which should be about now, by my reckoning, and then we hit a trough of despair. There's always something that goes sideways in this type of thing. And so my gut feel said September. By September, we're going to be in that trough of despair. And Agent Force isn't going to live up to the hype. So that was really why. I mean, I felt really excited, but I knew there's going to be a fall before it all picks itself up. I mean, it'll resolve itself. Like come 2025, we'll be back on track, but we're going to hit a period of depression.
So something that you say is that um, the underlying data infrastructure and the data governance layer, everything has to be in order, and that will condition everything. So this prediction that you're going to have, again, what was that, a billion agents by the end of 2025. So where are we now? So your prediction or your assumption versus where we are now, do you have any data?
I've seen numbers saying about 5,000 customers, um, and I'm reckoning probably about 5,000 customers might be providing 50,000 agents at some point soon. By the end of the year, they're gonna. I mean, let's think about this. An agent, you don't deploy an agent. I mean, it's not going to be like that. Um, when I share something with you, I'm not going to share a document anymore. Actually, you're a lawyer. You'll appreciate this. When I share a set of contracts, well, I'm a client. I share some contracts with you that I've had previously written. I'm not going to share contracts. I'm not going to share documents. I'm going to upload them to some sort of GPT or LLM and then share the LLM, and you can query that. And so if you think about that notion, the way I've put my resume in terms of a chat, you can chat to my resume now. So if every document turns into an agent, we'll hit a billion agents really, really fast. It's not going to be a problem. But then, so in the Salesforce world, I think they're starting slow. It's going, and people are taking the agents, but it's a little bit more trouble than you see on stage. On stage, it's all very simple. Um, You spin up an agent, you kind of write in text what you want it to do, you hook it to the flows that you already got. Fantastic. And all of a sudden you've got a working agent and you're off to the races. In reality, that there's some bumps. And so that's really what the book is trying to look at resolving, or getting ahead of those bumps and obstacles.
Were they too eager? Did they get ahead of themselves with the pricing model, asking for $2 per conversation? Has that put anyone off? Has that had an impact?
I think it has. But that's hindsight talking. It's very easy to say here. If you step back and think about, okay, I'm looking at most popular, most useful agent is probably going to be the call center agent. If your pricing is $3, $4 a call for a resolved call, $2, half the price. Great. Sounds good. It's not quite working out like that. I think, though, this is a time of discovery for absolutely everybody. If we look back at how Sam Altman said he's priced ChatGPT, $20, $200, it was a guess. And it's not enough. Even they understand that. If you think about the processing costs, all of the investment money is subsidizing, everybody buying into it, becoming a way of life. That's what they're buying into. So it is, the whole generative AI is massively subsidized. Now, in Salesforce case, $2 is great for certain circumstances. If you're putting them into a call center, if I've got a query engine that a high volume sales rep is going to use as a sales coach, they're going to be hammering on that, and so your sales rep might be running up a couple of $100 a day in asking it questions. So, it's there's a lot of different pricing models out there, that we've seen. That there is, usage, there is by the server, there is by the call, there is play. No, is it paid? Paid have just launched a pay on success. As you know, if you've come from consulting and trying to get a consulting project to be, we'll do it and we'll take a percentage of your success, it's like that's really difficult to measure. And so you've got that. And then if it's a different sort of problem, that perennial attribution problem of clicks, if you're doing it differently, you've got that. So I think pricing is something that we haven't figured out yet. My hunch is that Salesforce, within the next 3 months, is going to revise their pricing and come up with a better model.
Okay, very good. So before trying to understand what people that use Salesforce can do now, what's happening with your analysis? So you wrote this book. There's another volume coming up. Why? What is it that you left out?
I left out half, to be honest. What was happening was, I started writing in December, and by the time I got to like the first 5 chapters, I realized things were changing. So one of chapter 10 or chapter 9 is about headless business, and Salesforce hadn't launched it. And then in about February, I see announcements for headless, and it's like, okay, so I've got to get, and the book was already 200 pages. So I thought, oh, I'll just publish now. I'll publish it in time for Trailblazer DX in March. So that's what I did. I put out 5 chapters, and I've got another 5 coming. And the 5 coming deal with, actually, the first volume was all about Salesforce here and now. And the second volume goes outside of Salesforce. And the premise, why it's going outside, is because you can build and deploy agents inside of Salesforce, and these agents are going to go off to the web, and primarily they're going to use as levers the flows inside of Salesforce, and those flows are going to be able to send emails and carry out actions. However, what we need to understand is agents are going to actually negotiate with other agents. And so an agent might visit another website and be received by an agent, and the agents will have a conversation without the humans, and then they both come back to their results. And so Agent's a really good word. It's like an assistant that goes off. Your people will speak to my people. That's kind of what's going to happen. And so the book is really covering that. It's covering, how these agents need to have interoperability, how they need to have, there needs to be provenance on what it is they do. If I'm exchanging information, if my agent's exchanging information with your agent, there needs to be provenance on that exchange. What information can you see? How long can you see it for? And what can you do with it? So there's another piece to that. There's ethics. There's probably the economics of agents. When I've got thousands of agents executing, how do I measure them? How do I measure the swarm? Because I can't measure individual actions anymore. The agents need to kind of moderate themselves, but the act of the swarm, how do I ensure that it's aligned with what the business is trying to do? If I've got agents in sales and agents in marketing, this is how I generally explain it like this. If I've got an agent sending out nurture emails, and I've got another agent that is taking the process from lead to close, that or part of that. So I've got one agent that is traditionally optimized for opens and clicks, which is great. So I'm going to maximize those. And now I've got another agent on the other side that's receiving all of this stuff and receiving qualified leads. What can that agent do to close? And I've got such a large volume of leads coming in that I'm unable. Well, I know agents are sort of infinite, but the type of activity, I might not be closing them all. So both agents should actually work on the same metric. So how do I orchestrate across functional agents? And that was a problem that we've seemed to manage to solve in human teams. What's the handoff? What KPIs do we share? As we start to introduce agents, we need to rethink our KPIs and our structure and how successful the agents are, because the agents are not going to be static. They're going to learn as well. So how do we moderate the learning? So it's a new era in organizational design.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So what I was thinking, being very practical now, and before even getting into any sort of legal compliance, data protection, whatever. So, for example, in the B2B space, there'll be people using generative AI to create content, to build all of these papers that, downloadable papers to generate leads. I guess for now, as human beings, as decision makers, we'll still fall for some of these. So there's a process that would be qualifying the leads. And just as per your description, you may have then another process which is going to take those leads that have been qualified and is going to do something to get them closer to the finish line. We used to buy workflow automation tools and add them to in my years of enterprise sales. We would buy Salesloft, for example. I think that was the name, to attach it to Salesforce, and then it would automate an email, and the second email, there's a cadence. We would call it a cadence of emails. So that's gone. That's deterministic workflow automation. So if you're going to now apply this with the world of Gen AI powered agents, do you think the world of probabilistic is ready to build a process that is reliable to the point that we entirely kill the sales lofts?
I think the simple answer is no, we're not ready. But if we don't start now, we will never be ready. So I think there is going to be a good 6, 12, maybe 36 months of making some mistakes. We're going to be implementing these things, and they're going to do some non-deterministic things that we didn't expect, and we're going to learn from that and then control some of these agents. I think, if you start relying on an agent, if you start relying on an LLM's output, and you're going to notice that it's going to start hallucinating every now and again. So if you've got to check it before it hallucinates. And you actually use that hallucination in something. Maybe you're having a white paper written and it's just telling blatant lies. And so I think the same is going to happen with these agents. They're going to do some strange things. I'm going to be seeing a customer like opening things, and miss I'm going to mishandle something as a buying signal, and I'm going to send them out like a proposal form at that point. And then enough of those failures, we're going to go, okay, hang on a sec, this isn't quite ready. So I think Salesforce Sales Loft has enough time to go build their own version. There'll be Sales Loft agents that live inside of the Salesforce agent marketplace.
Also, if it is more chaotic or more language dependent and more probabilistic, it's in a way more human. But if we extend that, right? So now going deeper into this, into what people can do, right? And you wrote about this. So if I use Salesforce, what is the lowest hanging fruit for Agent Force now?
Yeah. So, I mean, actually, I'll tell you about the thing I wrote, but I'm going to tell you about the thing I haven't written. But one of the reasons that I was kind of saying that there's going to be that dip after the hype is that um, Agent Force isn't complete. It's very much a work in progress, and they had to launch it when they did, and they had to hype it when they did, because that was when the ability to create codeless agents was going to happen, and they hit the timing bang on. Before they came out before OpenAI Operator, so it was a really good call to do that, and they're not going to do that by halves. They're going to come out, all guns blazing, which they did at Dreamforce, and it's fantastic. However, um, there's lots of things that aren't quite there in Agent Force yet. Multi agents, they're not quite there. I can't orchestrate multiple agents taking over things. It's a little bit clunky here and there, and there's obviously going to be a lag, because I don't think that there are that many Salesforce orgs that have all their flows correct. People are still looking in workflows and other automations, and so they've got to migrate those to flows now. So there's a lag there, but what is there and what is robust are probably the out of box agents, the BDR, the business development agent, uh, the sales coach, and the customer service agent. They're out the box. Um, they're they're probably pretty close to deterministic in terms of an agent. That there's some set flows, set behaviors. They kind of work on the base implementation of Sales Cloud and Service Cloud. So they're relatively low risk, and they can actually alleviate some of your kind of human resource bottlenecks. If you haven't got a BDR, like doing follow up, and that's a really big problem inside of Salesforce. Yeah, we've got all these BDRs, but we haven't got enough to follow up on every lead that we're generating. So that kind of stuff, it's very easy, it's very simple. So my advice is that if you are in a Salesforce org, and your account manager or your rep is probably very enthusiastic that you start to build with Agent Force. So these are really great starters, and I'd begin there. And as you start to see the limits of those agents, that's when you can get a bit more sophisticated. But just get used to those, and even
Yeah.
if it's almost even if you don't think you need them yet, it's probably worth doing. There's a little bit of a cost to it, because if you haven't got data cloud, then that's a prerequisite outside of dev environment.
Oh, very good to know. Also, for the record, BDR, a business development role. So junior associates making all those calls. There we go. Some people that are not going to get hired ever if this thing works out. And then we enter finally the world that you were anticipating, which is the world of agent to agent, which seems to be natural, especially, of course, in B2B, until the consumers are up to speed with something like this. And so, just as a little teaser, because I know we have a separate episode in that separate world about the model context protocol, the MCP. But how will this change the world, and what is your vision for that part?
It's a tough one. So my philosophy has been, agents are really good at some things. They're really good at remembering an awful lot of information and just retrieving it very fast. Um, and they're actually they're very good at what's the word? Just kind of moving data between systems, just data transcription. I mean, if you've got a job today that is, um, if your job involves moving data from one system to another, whether you've got a spreadsheet in the middle or you're doing something, you need to think about what you're going to do when you are going to be. How do you get to manage a team of agents? If you're in that job today, you will be managing a team of agents doing it. And if you're not, you will probably be out of a job, um, and you need to retrain. But one of the things that agents don't do very well is compassion. Um, I think an agent can emulate empathy, but they can't do compassion because I read somewhere that compassion is a genuine desire to help. And because an agent cannot feel, cannot reciprocate with pain, one day they might, but today I don't see them doing it. They don't have that genuine desire to help. So I think there's going to be a role for humans. We need to work out where to deploy humans. In the book, I laid out, you know, a set of scenarios, whether it's a human talking to an agent, a human talking to an agent with a human behind it. And those scenarios are kind of documented as to where you'd want an agent. So perhaps um, if you're seeking relationship advice, then you might want to actually just talk to another human. If you're calling emergency services, then you want a human at the front end with an agent behind them. You don't want just a human. You need that agent to be like optimizing whatever service you're getting. But, if I'm just rerouting an Amazon package, I don't need a human. So, let's be aware of the context. We can't just apply agents willy-nilly. We've got to think about that. And so I'm I'm really hoping that people start to consider the user experience. It's like experience design is a really big piece of this. We've got to really think about, we've got to do some good design thinking about our processes because the processes today that we've got, particularly in Salesforce, are optimized and streamlined for how Salesforce wants the tables filled. And so we've got to think about a slightly different experience as to what the agent brings to the party. Because one of the things you don't want is you don't want this human, you don't want a human and then an agent and then another human and an agent. You want to kind of bunch up the human activity into one contiguous conversation. Otherwise, the customer's going to end up talking to an agent, then talking to one human, talking to an agent and then a different human. And that's probably the most frustrating customer experience where you have to end up doing that.
Okay, so there's going to be an element where a privacy program, a data protection program, will be impacted by agents. There'll be less humans in the loop. Perhaps we're able to do things with data that is less identifiable, pseudonymized data. We can optimize processes. We can avoid human mistakes. In the end, social engineering is the primary source of data breaches. But I want to ask you something that really has huge impact, which is going back to the economics, right? Salesforce, everyone, Adobe, even Oracle, they're all talking about productivity gains from Gen AI. And how is that going to play out? Are they going to be able to pass these savings to everyone? Are they going to be challenged by it? What's your vision in terms of generative AI and the impact on them, on all of these suppliers?
That's a big question. Um, I'm going to just throw it out there. I think it is, it spells I guess, a sea change for SaaS. Um, the all of the big players are claiming productivity gains, and it's fantastic. And they're claiming that they're using their engineering teams are using generative AI to be much more productive when they code, when they test, when they deploy. It's going to be fantastic. Um, Now, are they going to pass these savings on to the end customers? I don't think they've done that in the past. I don't see them doing that yet. However, um, the effect of that, I think SaaS companies have, you know, grown with, as the water has risen, all the SaaS companies have grown, that they came in with a promise. We're going to relieve you of your IT department of or having to provision all the hardware and the middleware. We're just going to give you the application and you just pay by the use. And they've got big. And so, SaaS contracts are now 6, 7 figures. So those are big numbers. And the thing about SaaS is, it's not bespoke. It is a system that's built for everybody, and you still need to configure it and you still need to customize it. And so there's a pretty gigantic services model around it. And the SI partners in the Salesforce ecosystem take the place of your IT department, and they're on tap. So it's a better cost model for you. It's OpEx, and so it's fine. But when I'm now spending millions of dollars on customizations and I'm looking at this and it's like, hang on a sec. If I stop and think about this, I can actually build this application myself. It'll be custom built to me. It'll have all the advantages and I can maintain it in house. So what I'm foreseeing is probably the rise. It's not the reincarnation of IT departments. I think it's a different thing. I think, large organizations that have been typically been SaaS customers, they can actually create engineering teams of their own and actually build stuff themselves. So the irony is, the productivity gains that are going to come for the SaaS vendors are going to be equally available to their customers. So maybe we need to rethink the SaaS model. I think Reid Hoffman last week showed a video of he asked some Gen AI development tool to replicate LinkedIn, and he said they built it and it was very satisfactory.
Yeah, a lovable or something, or bolt.
But if he can do that, then we can all do it now. There's some amazing applications showing up. I think we're going to have a big app proliferation very soon, and it's not the coding that's going to be the advantage. It's going to be the customer experience. It's going to be the support. It's going to be how they go to market. It's going to be, we're not going to compete on code anymore. That's for certain.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about this in after the magic. In the meantime, I just want to say I do think we're still far from getting 100% of the code polished and ready, and we still create an optical illusion by using all of these tools, and there's still this last mile. But yes, with a much smaller team, I'm sure you can do a lot. Is there any advantage then, as the last question, any advantage, or is the agentic AI and agents the escape for all these platforms? Now that they see they could be commoditized, is that a moat?
So I mean, for the longest time, I've been saying, AI is the last resort. When 2016, when we were building NLP products, I just said AI is the last resort. If you can do it with stats or just standard reporting in BI, just do that, because AI requires machine learning, it requires engineers, it requires training, it requires loads of infrastructure. And now we've gone on to Gen AI. If you think, going back to what I said about the processing costs, the money that is now going in, I mean, I think the LLM companies have taken $100 billion between them. And there's no sign of that being recouped as revenue yet. We are all going to be hooked, and then we're going to turn up the prices, and then we're going to pay for this. And so, I think SaaS companies still have a future, but they've got to rethink how they do things. They've got to kind of figure out their offering. Today there was a little question. Should Salesforce become what is it? An ARM, an agent relationship management company? And it's like, well, agent relationship management is actually now in 3 layers. There's kind of you've got to manage the deployment of agents. You've got to orchestrate their behavior, but then you've got to provide some governance over the top of it. So if you just think about those 3 layers in an agentic stack in a business, there's whole new lines of business to be had. So I think we're going to, the next 5 years is going to be very interesting. We're going to be doing a lot of reinventing in the tech stack.
Very good. Gam, thanks again.
You're very welcome.
Okay, that's all for today. Follow us on Blue Sky and in the Masters of Privacy Altogether profile, you will find the starter pack, which includes the feeds of all of our past guests. There is also a Masters of Privacy LinkedIn channel, which I invite you to follow, where you will find links to our transcripts, cheat sheets, and other surprises every now and then. Our main website is mastersofprivacy.com. Thank you for listening.